Controllers handle incoming requests and return responses to the client. They handle and define app routing. To create a controller, you use the controller decorator, and the argument you pass to this decorator defines the base route for all routes within the controller. Let's create our first controller. Create a new folder called dogs, and inside that folder, let's create a dog controller, which is a class called dogs controller. This class needs to be decorated with the controller from NestJs common, imported from NestJs common. And let's say the base route is dogs. Now, wherever you write inside the dog controller will be the route handlers. For example, a find all, which will return, let's say, a string for now, because I only want to return a simple message saying this route returns all dogs. But how do we know if this route is a get, a post, a put? We use a method decorator. In this case, I want a get, and you also import it from NestJs common. But now we are not using the dog controller. We need to export it and go to our ep.module, and here in the controllers part, we need to import it. Dog controller. Now let's test this route. To test the routes, I'm using an extension called REST client, which is this one, but you can use wherever you want, like Postman, Insomnia. So for me to use that extension, I'm going to create a new folder called HTTP, and inside I will do all my requests in a rec.http. The way this works is you write the method and then you write the path. So HTTP localhost dogs. And if I do the request, this route returns all dogs. We created a dogs controller, defined the base route, which is the dogs, and then inside we defined which method would do this route handler, which is the method get. If I change to put and I need to import it, now this won't work. As you can see, cannot get dogs. But if I do a put, this route returns all dogs. Let's keep it as a get, since a put makes no sense. And let's create a get by ID. A get by ID is pretty simple. Here you write ID, let's change the name, and this route returns one dog. Now, if I do a get by ID, so wherever thing I want, one, this route returns one dog. As a challenge, I want you to try to do a fetch, a post, and a delete route that simply return strings, saying, for example, this route updates a dog, this route deletes a dog. So try to do it by yourself and then come back to the video. So this is how you should have done it. And now let's test the routes. Let's post a dog. A dog doesn't actually need an ID, so the action adds a new dog. Then a patch. This action updates a specific dog. And a delete. This action removes a specific dog. We now have a basic route. Let's now talk about arguments. Arguments are used inside route handlers, so right here. The first one we are going to learn is the param. So import param, and let's call this ID so we can get the ID the person sends in the param. The ID will be of type string. And now, instead of saying this route returns one dog, I'm going to say this route returns a dog with an ID of, and then use the ID. For this to work, I need to change this. And there we go. Now if I do a get and I say 12, for example, I get this route returns a dog with an ID of 12. Routes like the patch and the delete also need the parameter ID. Try to do the same thing for these routes and then come back to the video. And there we go. I added the parameter on both routes, and now if I do a patch, I get the 1, and if I do a delete, I get the 13. Now let's use the body decorator, which you use it the same way. You import body, and then you give a type to body, so any, for example, and I'm going to return body just to show you I can get the body. I need to say that the content type is the application JSON because I want to send a JSON. And here I can send wherever I want because I said it was any. So name, Diogo, and if I do a post, see? And if I say return body.name, I can now get only Diogo. But we don't want anything. We always want some specific thing to be sent on the body. For that, we create a DTO, which is a data transfer object, which is exactly what it says. It's an object that carries data. So let's create our first DTO in a new folder called DTO and call it create dog.dto.ts. And this is just a class. Export class create dog.dto. And here you write wherever rules you want. I want a dog to have a name, which is of type string, to have an age, which is of type number, to have a breed, which is a string, and to have is good boy, which is a boolean that says if he's a good boy or not. Now, instead of any, we can use the create dog DTO. So let's change it and import it from DTO/create dog DTO. Body.name actually returns a string. Let's remove it. And now you see we have an error. Create DTO is not assignable to the type string because this doesn't return a string anymore. This returns this DTO. So if you want to return the body, we need to also return the DTO. And there we go. Now we know exactly what is going to be sent on the body. You can create DTOs for everything. Parameters, bodies, queries, even the response. As you can see here, I'm using a DTO as the response. In this post, we are getting a 201 created. But in a get, we get 200. In a patch, a 200 as well. And deleted a 200. NestJs uses 200 for every method besides posts, which is 201. But we can change that. We can use the decorator HTTP code and write wherever we want. So I advise you to use the HTTP status, which you also import from common. And here you write the code, which is no content. This returns a 204. If I now do a delete, let the server restart, I get 204 no content. And even though I'm sending content here, it isn't being returned because the 204 has no content. So I can actually remove this and say it returns void, which is nothing. Another thing you might want to use is a header, which you import from the same place, and you can write wherever you want. So, for example, cache control, which is none. Now, if I send a delete, I get cache control none in the headers. I'm going to comment this just because I don't like seeing that squiggly line. And the last thing I want to show you in this controller episode is the redirect and query decorators. I'm going to write on top of here a get called redirect. So it will be /docs/redirect. And below it, I'm going to write a handler called redirect. It doesn't really matter. It will return a string. And for now, it will just be test. Let's just see if this is working. Let's go get, and test is coming. Let's now redirect it to somewhere else. At redirect, and you import it. And as you can see here, it redirects the requests to a specified URL. So let me use an URL, for example, https://nike.com. I'm going to use nike.com. If I do this route, you don't have permission to access Okay, let me actually do this on the browser. /docs/redirect. I got redirected to the Nike website. Let's now learn about queries. Let's import a query from NestJs common and say, for example, the query is going to be language. The language is going to be of type string. And let's return lang. And I'm going to comment redirect just so I can show you how the query works for now. If I come here, I get nothing. if I do where lang equals 1, 2, 3, I get 1, 2, 3. So query is basically a parameter, but it's optional. To finish the video, I'm going to use both redirect and query with some logic to show you what's possible to do in controllers. I created this simple logic where you get the base URL, which is the Nike, and if the person sends the language, which is optional, so that's why we have a condition, if it sends the language, then it goes to the nike.com/that language. Else, it just goes to nike.com. So let's test this. If I now come here to the redirect route, I'm going to nike.com. This is already put by Nike, okay? So it's the default. For me, it's French, I don't know why. But now, if I use where lang equals Portuguese, I get the website in Portuguese. I'm now going to comment this since it was just for the example.